What is exciting you the most about the Solana ecosystem?
I've always been excited about open finance. I think that is why we are here. We're here to build a financial internet. The main reason why I got so interested in Solana is because I thought this is the only thing that can actually be that financial infrastructure.
What kind of building blocks are you expecting to see?
It's really about building an on-chain economy where there's going to be a whole variety of different financial experiences that 4 billion people on the internet now can access. And always in financial markets, one of the most important features is...
Well, now in the Binance Studios, we have Lily Liu, the president of Solana Foundation, diving into all things related to Solana, the outlook for the crypto space, Memecoins, and much more besides. Lily, thank you for taking the time to join me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
That is an absolute pleasure to have you here in the studios. Thank you for taking time out of an extremely busy schedule the past few days to come over here. We're going to dive into a range of topics today, but I think first and foremost, it's really interesting to take a look back at your career and how you found crypto and got in the space to start with.
Sure. So I got into crypto back in 2013. I was living in Shanghai at the time, and back in those very early days, Shanghai was actually one of the global centers of crypto. And so before that, I worked in traditional finance. I worked in investment banking, consulting, also in private equity, and I'd always had this longstanding interest in China's development, which actually kind of sparked some of my interest in crypto as well, because some of the broader questions as to how do cultures inform economies, inform governance, and kind of this idea that you would have an economy governed by its participants is wild. And it's so crazy, right? Because the mental models and the scale models that we have as to kind of how people govern their own communities is, we've got democracy, we've got more top-down type of structures, but there's been kind of like, ideas as to, what if there's like more radical sort of people-driven governance. And that was what initially sparked my interest in Bitcoin. Now, of course, like many people, I first heard about Bitcoin when the price is going up and people were writing articles about it. And so I was pretty skeptical at first, where I looked at it, I thought, okay, that's definitely a scam, right? That's definitely some sort of offshore money laundering type of thing. Didn't help when I heard that Silk Road is what was using Bitcoin. And so I decided always go to the source. I read the white paper and I thought, okay, well, not being an engineer, I don't know exactly kind of like the mechanics of it and kind of how that works from a technical standpoint. Yeah. But this is definitely not offshore money laundering only. And there's something really profound about this. And what I thought about in the context of we live in a ever more digital world, the idea that you would have self-custody, I thought, okay, well, that becomes interesting because then you actually have digital property rights. And back then, the only scale implementation of digital property rights was Apple DRM.
Okay.
Right? Around songs.
Yes.
And that had already changed the market around. It went from like Napster and Pirate Bay, content sharing, right? And LimeWire, we've all used these before, right? And BitTorrent and all the rest of it. Yes. And what that did is it took demand and created a real market out of it. And so there's really these various bits and pieces, and I thought this was really cool. And on top of that, my friend who introduced me to it, actually Bobby Lee, who I think is also the person who introduced CZ to Bitcoin in Shanghai during those days, through poker games, was the first person I encountered who just voraciously would not stop talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And we've all now encountered the crypto religious, where they're just so passionate about it. So it was a combination of those different things. It's very rarely do you see the sort of self-inspired fanaticism from very intelligent people about something. When you see that, then you should pay attention.
Absolutely. And actually, to go back to Bobby Lee, I met Bobby Lee at a conference in 2017, and he gave me a physical hardware wallet with some Bitcoin on. And probably about 2 weeks ago when Bitcoin hit 100K, I was sifting through my apartment like, I'm sure it has some Bitcoin on there, but it has to be on there. But it just goes to show that people who then pass on knowledge, but also like a little bit of an industry tidbit, the influence it can have.
Yeah, totally.
And I think your range of experience from private equity, also then like kind of in traditional finance, is a perfect storm for what you're doing now and really kind of disrupting, building, and kind of reinventing what we see. I have to touch on communities and kind of the culture that comes with this space, because Bitcoin, as it came into inception, it didn't have a marketing budget. It sold itself. And from there on, I think Solana is a great example of a real community leader. Yeah. What makes a good strong crypto community, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think it's so core to why crypto exists. One of the core, like we were talking about, it's to kind of introduce this new model of how communities govern and also monetize, because it's fundamentally about community ownership, right? If you look at the various narratives that people have talked about with crypto, it's sort of, it's democratizing ownership. And the phrases around it have changed a number of times over 10 years, but like democratizing ownership, the ownership economy, anyone can earn on the internet of finance. What all of those concepts come down to is that the addressable financial market here is any human that has access to the internet. And that's pretty broad these days. It's at least 4 billion, probably more at this point.
Yeah.
And it's this idea that instead of sort of fragmenting all into countries and then banks and so on and so forth that relate to one another with analog systems, because of course they do. That's the way things got built over time before we had the internet. So I think the idea is not just that you can have financial rails, but fundamentally this idea around community-based ownership. And the scale model that we have today is a model around corporate ownership. And it's worked fantastically well. It's been responsible for the tremendous rate of wealth creation that has, improved the human condition tremendously, right? And so while that is the best model that we have right now, Bitcoin introduced this experiment around community-based ownership and what that could mean. I still think we're super early in that journey, which is why we have so many governance tokens that don't actually govern so much, but one day they will. And that is what I think is so fundamentally important as to why it's really embedded are important. It's not just because communities are important, but it's also because it's really embedded into the core value of blockchains. It's about community-based ownership. Okay, so then what does that mean? Well, I think we typically see communities in the Web 2 space as kind of being users. We kind of consider those things to be equivalent. So what that means is that as the platform, you have a product and then users, financial resource, because it's a company and that's what companies do. And there's nothing wrong with that. Where something like Solana or L1 is concerned, really we're just a GitHub repo. That's it. Okay. And kind of joke that we're all just servants of a GitHub repo.
Yeah.
So then what is the actual value of it? The value of that is the people like Bobby in 2013 who are just so passionate about this community. And part of it is because, wow, this enables me to have agency and build a business in totally new ways. And part of it is because I really like being in this culture of the other people around me. But what it fundamentally comes down to is like that is the community-based ownership is what gives all of this value. So then, of course, it has to be about building community, but not just in terms of people hanging out online and people chatting to one another online. Of course, that is what helps build culture. But then how do you move that from hanging out into actual value creation? And then that is where many of the things we've been focused on around building communities, building developer communities and people building together, right? We always talk about building, but that's how you take community energy and actually make it into real world value. And that's why, our shorthand for it is community. But it's really what we've done as Web3 versus Web2 is to move from people talking online, hanging out online, social media, chatting, so on and so forth, which actually gets monetized to the platform through advertising networks. Now there's kind of P2P monetization of that to the people who are actually, doing the work. And that gives people economic agency, a reason to get even more involved. So that to me is the real kind of meaning and the value and the importance of community to kind of the core principles of why blockchain is interesting.
Yeah, and it creates a really strong feedback loop as well. That's something that we're really open with in Binance. It's like, come on, share feedback. We want to hear from you guys because you're the ones driving the ecosystem.
Absolutely. And Binance has done a tremendous job on community, which is why one of the reasons why Binance is Binance, right?
Yeah.
It has a little bit of a different purpose in the ecosystem, but I think Binance is really understood that from the beginning. And some of the words that people oftentimes use to describe that, I think are, people talk about it as community, as marketing. The way those things are expressed in crypto those things are even more important in crypto in ways that I think that the connotation of those terms actually understates quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the internet there and the kind of the seamless integration is something that you're really passionate about for blockchain, kind of like how we use the internet now. What do you think needs to happen for us to get to a point for the user interface, for the end user that uses blockchain, for us to get to a point that it is on a similar adoption path to the internet?
Well, it's got to be competitive with the UI that we have on the internet today. And this is actually what got me excited about Solana when I started as a user in 2021. I always like to use the new things that come out and just kind of see how it's going. And I got into DeFi actually not so much with the food-based DeFi that originally happened on Ethereum back in 2020. My big entry into DeFi as a user was through Solana. And what got me so excited about it was just quite simply, I could click a button and something would happen. Because I, having started with Bitcoin and then having used Ethereum quite a bit, was used to an experience where in Bitcoin, you click a button, you go make yourself lunch. And then with Ethereum, you go click a button and you go make yourself coffee. And with Solana, you click and it just feels like using the internet anywhere. And I thought, okay, well, there's still so many things to build beyond that because the UI is not just about fast and cheap. It never is about fast and cheap. It's about all the things that get enabled by fast and cheap. But that is a necessary component. There's only so much UI, for example, you could build around a modem-based online experience where you have to click, dial in, hear the sound, and then wait and wait and wait. And so that was really the beginning of it for me getting more interested in Solana. And then as I got more involved in the culture, the community, and the people, I thought, okay, well, there's multiple building blocks here that are going to come together in really unique ways.
What kind of building blocks are you expecting to see? Because obviously payments is a huge one. Yeah. So I think we hear the buzzword of payments and people might not even really resonate with just like the sheer disruption that could be within that space. So what kind of building blocks are you expecting to see?
Totally. Well, I think that there's a blockchain is not a blockchain without the blockchain itself. It's quite literally the blockchain. But then there's kind of different parts of what I think makes a blockchain ecosystem. There's the blockchain itself, right? No network, nothing to do. And then the next order of business is building a developer community, right? Because no developers, no applications, nothing for users to do. And so I think a number of folks within crypto have jumped straight to, okay, how do we get more users and wallets on chain? Nothing wrong with those metrics. It's just that to actually sustainably grow those metrics outside of the many things people oftentimes do by doing kind of a spot deal there or here, an embedded wallet here or there, so you actually have to have an engine of open source independent developers, right? We're never done with that. I just heard that for the first time since 2016, so basically ever, the highest growth developer community in 2024 is Solana. It was the first time we actually exceeded Ethereum in adding new developers.
Wow.
So that's pretty exciting, right? So it's really about the developer community. First is the network, validator community, then developer community, and then you have applications that will add value to users. And I think that because crypto has always been about open finance, I think that's always been what blockchain is supposed to do. Payments are a really big part of that. Now, because we've had as an industry a relatively high amount of success with DeFi, now when we think about DeFi, we conflate that we sort of map that almost 100% over AMMs, lend, borrow, and largely mechanisms that support speculative use cases. And I think that will always exist. But if we contextualize that in the broader context of what happens in an economy, right? Because we're not here just to do speculative permissionless trading because then, your bank can't tell you what to do and the government can't tell you what to do. I understand why that resonates with a lot of people. There is value in that. It's really about building an on-chain economy where there's going to be a whole variety of different financial experiences, financial assets, venues that 4 billion people or however many billion people on the internet now can access. And of course, different people are going to access different things. And so I think payments is a really important part of that because in any economy, you have to have a transactional economy. It can't just be about trading for more yield and more yield. And as we've seen a number of times now, at some point, those speculative cycles, like Beanie Baby version 1, 2, and 3. We had ICOs and we had ICOs back in 2017, 2018, and then we had NFTs. Yeah. Now we have Memecoins, right? It's the latest generation of Beanie Babies. And at some point, that cycle will end. So then what are people going to stay on chain for? Well, people are going to stay on chain if it's actually useful for something other than speculation. And so in a way, that utility is a demand sink for people to stay on chain. Okay. And so payments is a shorthand way of defining the non-speculative transactional economy. And as it turns out, now that we have scale stablecoins is actually really useful, right? Now, if you're going to be doing cross-border payments of any sort, it's slow and expensive. And it's expensive because it's actually really hard to move money from the United States, call it from like San Francisco to called a village in the Philippines.
Yes.
It's actually really expensive to do that because can you imagine the number of actors in between that have to take credit risk on that money? And so if you have scale stablecoin markets, which we now finally do, it's taken us a number of years and it's an industry because guess what? It takes time to get to $200 billion of stablecoin issuance. And you have performant rails, which you now deal with Solana, then you can actually have financial infrastructure for moving money. And that's super important because stablecoins are, of course, always the base asset for any market, right? And then, but what I think is particularly interesting about it is it's not just that now, I can transfer any amount of money instantly, settles instantly to you, and I paid, essentially whatever the validator fees were. There's also value in is the fact that it used to take 3 days to settle, and now it's instant. So there's the time value of money. There's the actual new profit pool in that. So usually when people talk about the value proposition of payments, they're talking about the fact that whatever I was paying the credit card company or to Stripe or whatever is anywhere between 50 bips and 350 bips of transaction fees. And now that can be making up kind of like 10. And so typically people are looking at the cost savings, which is part of it. But really that cost savings is reflecting the efficiency, which also introduces a new profit pool. And you add in peer-to-peer kind of liquidity pool dynamics. And there's actually entirely new yield opportunities out of that over the scale of payments. So I think it's, like most things with new technology, it can't just be it's faster, cheaper, and constant. That's good. It's just not good enough because it's a little bit like the original internet. People thought, Time Warner is going to own content on the internet because they own content today. Mm-hmm. And now you can consume newspaper content fast, cheap, and constant. And that was good, but that's not what actually happened. It's always about some long tail supply and demand part of the curve that no one could see because no one could monetize it, or organize it, or reveal it earlier. And now this new technology allows you to do that. So that's what I think is really exciting about payments, actually. It's not just point A to point B really fast and cheap. It's really about new financial primitives that create actually new earning opportunities out of that, call it a 3-day settlement arbitrage.
And stablecoins has been a huge role in that, as you said. Mm-hmm. So you had first come across Bitcoin in 2013.
Yeah.
You had a history in private equity and finance. Mm-hmm. We saw stablecoins come along somewhere along this journey. If we look forward into kind of early 2025 now, mm-hmm. would you say that we're on track? Are you surprised at how mm-hmm. fast we've integrated with stablecoins, or would you have expected, in hindsight, looking back and when you first saw the interaction of stablecoins on the market, did you think we'd be further ahead?
I think if people had Solana earlier, then we'd be further ahead. I really do think that you have to have a network that can support a global payments network. Mm-hmm. And the amount of volume that could potentially move over that stablecoin or through a payment network is almost unlimited. Yes. In the same way that 25 years on from the internet, today, the amount of bandwidth demand just for the Web 2 internet is unlimited, and the demand for data center capacity is almost unlimited, especially now with AI, certain types of data centers. Mm-hmm. And I think we're also going to see that as well. And so you have to fundamentally have financial infrastructure that can scale. That's a huge technical challenge, but that's at least a challenge that we, as Solana, as ecosystem, took a perspective on, and trying to put as much on mainnet as possible. Also because if you believe the core use case of crypto is financial infrastructure, and you think about, okay, well, what do financial markets, what are the features that financial markets are like kind of first order, second, third order, different product features? And always in financial markets, one of the most important features is to have unified liquidity. And so if you have an architecture that at least seeks to unify as much as possible on mainnet, you will always be better for financial markets, right? Yes, there are trade-offs with that, but you have to think about not just all trade-offs are equal, but what are must-have features, what are nice-to-have features. And I think that's one of the challenges that a number of the infrastructure solutions in this space have, which is that they trade off instantly to L2, kind of these asynchronous execution environment, and there's lots of variations of that. But what that does is it immediately fragments liquidity as a first-order architectural requirement, whereas unified liquidity is actually a first-order requirement of financial markets, which is the core purpose of blockchains.
And for a lot of people that are in this space, because what you said there, and I just want to hone in on it because you said like unlocking unified liquidity. So if we look at the long-term end game of actually unlocking that unified liquidity, how would then that not only level the playing field, but how would that change the infrastructure of like everyone at home and watching as well, like that we know is actually quite hard for the human mind to comprehend.
Certainly, I think less of the guts of the protocols need to be exposed at the end of the day. And I think some of that is now happening with AI agents, right? Abstracting away the nuts and bolts of consumers having to onboard at every single step of the infrastructure components. So that will get abstracted away, and then that will create a set of user experiences that will be appealing to the full spectrum of people that might want to be using crypto and may not even want to know that they're using crypto. Yeah, they just want to know that I can send a payment, and it used to cost me 3.5% or 6.5% through a money changing platform, and now it's basically free. And now also I can take that money and directly invest that into yielding opportunities. Actually, I've been super impressed with the Binance app for years, right? Because if you look in the app and just the range of things that you can do, it is wild. Yeah. Okay. It is absolutely wild. And the only thing that has been kind of competitive with that is either, like a more modern Western fintech or some of the Chinese payment platforms that have been embedded in, WeChat Pay, that have been built over the last 10 years, where you have just so much more functionality adjacent to a payments experience. What you have in a number of these exchange applications, it's incredible what you can do with just a few clicks of your thumbs.
It's true. It's the freedom of money. And I know when I speak to kind of friends and family, and they say, oh my goodness, so you can earn, and then there's all of these different tools that actually for traditional finance, people just didn't have access to. And it's really wild, liberating.
Yes.
So we're going to move now on to the topic that we cannot have a Solana representative down and not ask about meme coins.
Yeah.
Something that you mentioned was 2024 was the year that you saw the biggest onboarding for Solana developers compared to any other ecosystem. And I think some of that must come down to just the sheer amount of traffic that we did see come from the meme coin craze. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on meme coins.
Yep.
And if you think they're bringing value to the space long term.
Yeah. So Solana's financial infrastructure and meme coins, they're not traditional. If you ask traditional TradFi whether meme coins are financial asset, they probably say no. They're just meme coin. They're all narrative, and they fundamentally don't have any fundamental value. But what I think they are very directly an expression of financialized community. Sure, there's of course, the whole other side to meme coins that is not always very savory. Understand that. But what I think, in the same way that with the internet, there's a whole range of content that people have different opinions about. And there's what some would consider more respectable content. And then, of course, there's an entire underbelly of content on the internet that many people do not want to engage with, right? Or many people do not want to admit that they're engaging with. Different things. And so I think that is similar with kind of like financial content, if you will. And if your financial infrastructure, in the same way that the Web 2 or Web 1, Web 2 interface information rails are open and agnostic to the full range of a good, bad, and the ugly, that's also going to be true on open financial infrastructure. And I think that's just what it's supposed to be. And so meme coins are a certain part of that spectrum. And money market funds issued by storied Wall Street institutions are also going to be on another part of that spectrum. And I don't think that Solana or really any of these L1 blockchains are vertical specific. In fact, I think that they definitionally should not be. And sometimes folks who have brought a little bit more of like a Web 2 mindset into Web 3 have thought, okay, well, the wisdom always is land and expand. So it works all the time in Web 2, right? It's been proven however many times. And so why don't we pick a vertical, go win that vertical, and go win the other verticals? And so therefore, I think there is a little bit of this kind of subconscious desire to see vertical specificity of general purpose infrastructure. Whereas I see it a little bit differently, which is if you're going to be application specific, then you are making general infrastructure trade-offs while being application specific. And that's just going to run, that's going to be a snake eating its tail sometime within 24 months. And so the harder thing to do, what is necessary to do, is you have to have breadth and depth. Of course, that's hard to do, which is why not many people have done it. And to be able to span the spectrum between meme coin content and then more, TradFi assets coming on chain at the other end.
Yeah.
And so I think in the sense of meme coins are a new crypto native type of asset, there's obviously some form of value in that. And as a side note, it has had a lot of value to validators because of priority fees.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true. And
So the irony of it is that meme coins have probably done more to finance infrastructure development than possibly venture capitalists, which is deeply ironic.
It is, but this is also one of the beauties of this industry as well, is capturing the momentum and the kind of the social attention of this space will then kind of bring utility and it will snowball itself in its own regard. We did speak a little bit earlier about the NFT summer. We saw the DeFi summer, 2017 was the ICO boom. Would you put meme coins in that category of a short-term trend, or would you say actually with some of the references that you just made that maybe it's got a little bit more momentum and long-term give?
Well, I think in all of those trends, there's the frenzy, the tulip frenzy, and people still like tulips, you know, and people still like Beanie Babies. Are they being auctioned for thousands of dollars? No. And there's still a number of NFT communities that are in the billion plus range. So they're very substantial. And I think the same thing will happen with meme coins. There's always, you know, in crypto, we clearly have these boom and bust cycles. And every time it's a little bit uncomfortable on the way up, right? And then people start sort of sounding alarm bells. And then this also happened with the 1999 internet boom. So this boom and bust cycle, of course it will. That's going to happen at some point. Yeah. Then I think going back to what you were talking about earlier, if you're financial infrastructure, then you have a range of different financial use cases. And what we don't have right now is we don't have enough utility on chain to create a demand sink for when there isn't this like, you know, go speculative yield opportunity.
Would you say that's the biggest challenge for kind of scalability and security of the blockchain networks at the moment, is this kind of boom and bust cycles, or is there something else that you say would be a bigger challenge?
Well, I think that having real utility is going to smooth out the boom and bust, not the boom and bust of any one trend, because meme coins, that is a trend that will probably fade over time, but then create the smoothing between different speculative trends and speculative fervors. You know, you see that in the macroeconomy as well. When there's high yield opportunities in one market versus another, I mean, people do all sorts of things. Remember the Japan carry trade that happened, a number of months ago? That was happening because of high rates in the US. And so people were borrowing cheap in yen and then yielding T-bills. And at scale, if you can, you know, get an extra, 100 bips out of that over scale, that can be massive. And so that was happening. That was a speculative leverage loop, right? And then that for a week or two had a global impact on trillion-dollar markets because, and the entire economy of Japan. So it's not unique to crypto, guys.
It's very true. I actually read about it from Arthur Hayes' blog post, and I thought it's kind of meme coins one day and then it's Japanese yen the other. And you just don't know what the subsectors are going to be.
That's right. And we're a little bit of a microcosm of, actually, we have some of these fervent lending loops happening right now. And that's going to play out in a certain way. The thing about crypto is that because we all live out in the open, if it's community ownership, the way community talks to one another when you don't know exactly, it's like inherently like a many-to-many type of conversation, then it all has to happen out in the open. Whereas in traditional finance, it's usually sort of aggregation through known counterparties. So you kind of know at some point who would I talk to about what, who trades what, and there's much more sort of concentration because it all gets aggregated through a sort of knowable list of actors. So in crypto, it can seem a lot more wild and crazy, but that's because there's no doors on the house type of thing. Yeah.
And what would you say to people that are watching at home and listening to this that are fairly new to crypto, or even if they've had a few seasoned market cycles that are still, maybe they would like a little bit more confidence that they are investing in something longer term rather than a short term boom and bust cycle and maybe getting in at the wrong point?
Yeah. Well, I think the one good way to do that is just to zoom out on the Bitcoin chart. I think this is depending on how you count, either third or fourth cycle. And I felt all of the emotions in all of the different ways. You could mark the top and bottom points in Bitcoin. And here we are at 100K. And this is 16 years on, right? And so I think that if you take the Bitcoin chart and you take away the hour, the 1 hour chart, the 4 hour chart, the 1 day chart, and go to the 1 week chart and then zoom out into the 1 month chart, I'm not saying that that's going to be the chart for every coin out there. Obviously it won't be. But I think, seeing what the over a long-term period of time trend line on that one, maybe calm some nerves.
Fantastic. There's so much that I want to pick your brains on, but I think as an ending note to ask you, when it comes to what is exciting you the most about things within the Solana ecosystem, but also at a wider scale? I think 2024, if we look back at the last 12 months, have been surprising, euphoric, interesting, shocking for the industry. What would you say is next for you that you're excited about?
I've always been excited about open finance. I think that is why we are here. We're here to build a financial internet. We live in a digital age. And when were we going to digitize money? Now is when we're digitizing money. And in the same way, the original internet made content available to anyone with access, and then access became cheap. Then we see what happened with that and the radical sort of peer-to-peer participation, engagement that happened with that. And I think that's really collectively what I think we're all building. It's open finance, internet of finance, programmable money. Those are some of the terms that have been used for it. And the main reason why I got so interested in Solana is because I thought this is the only thing that can actually be that financial infrastructure. And so Solana's financial infrastructure, that's, I think, what it's always been. And I think that's what blockchain has always been here to do. So I'm just excited to be able to contribute a little bit to that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. That was amazing to hear some of your insights. And I hope that everyone listening has found it valuable, shared it with friends and family, and yes, enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.